Warning. Tongue and Geek contains heavy spoilers. If you haven't read, watched, or played the content being reviewed this episode, know that we will definitely spoil major plot points. Also, this show isn't for kids. We use words like and and it would take too much time and effort to edit them all out. Please don't tell our moms. Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome to Tongue in Geek, where two more white guys on the internet share their unsolicited opinions on all things geeky. I'm Isaac.
I'm Tyler.
And today we're celebrating our 50th episode by honoring the man who gave us our sign-off, the late, great filmmaker Satoshi Kon. We'll be reviewing his directorial debut as far as filmmaking goes, the 1997 psychological horror movie Perfect Blue. We'll also be reviewing his fourth and final film, the 2006 science fiction thriller Paprika. Tyler, any background you want to give us on Kon or either of these films?
They're both based off books, which I thought was interesting. I didn't look into the book of Paprika too much, but Perfect Blue being based off a book intrigued me. The book and the initial draft of the screenplay, they were more of just a straightforward horror film about a stalker stalking a pop idol. Mm-hmm. And then Kon comes in and he does what Kon do, and he makes it psychological and creepy and all about doubles and fantasy and reality blurring. Oh, and that's the connective tissue between these two films.
Yeah, that seems to be a running theme throughout all of his works, or at least most of them, is this like blurring between reality and fantasy. Those who don't know, Satoshi Kon, who was the director for Tokyo Godfathers, which we reviewed back a couple years ago now.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, he was born in 1963, died in 2010 of pancreatic cancer. He was a member of the Japanese Animation Creators Association, which is a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to improving the working conditions for anime creators. He made his manga debut with his manga Toriko in 1984. His anime debut, not as a director, but working on anime. He was an animator and background designer for Erosion Z, which debuted in 1991. And yeah, I think we've touched on most of the important details. Like Tyler said, both of these movies are based on books. Perfect Blue is based on Perfect Blue, Complete Metamorphosis by, and I apologize, I'm going to be butchering a lot of names tonight.
Yoshikazu Takeuchi.
Yeah, that. And Paprika was based on the book by the same name by Yasutaka Tsutsui, I think. All right, I guess start with Perfect Blue. Where do you want to start with that one?
Okay, I was going to say, which movie do you want to start?
Well, should we start with what we mentioned before we started recording? Maybe do a little trigger warning?
Okay, yes. Trigger warning for both films, but in particularly Perfect Blue. A lot of heavy subject matter, a lot of heavy themes, not least of all sexual assault. So just be warned.
Yeah. Okay,
Perfect Blue. I have a bit of a background with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
My background is that I've known about it and heard about it for years and years and years, but for some reason, it's just one of those movies I never got around to seeing. Like, when I mean years, like, I started talking online and like looking into films, specifically horror film online in the early 2000s, and I knew about it all the way back then, and I just never got around to seeing it.
Wow. I mean, it's regarded as one of the best anime films of all time.
Mm-hmm. And it's one of those anime films where you can see its impact on Hollywood. A lot of filmmakers kind of shy away from saying that anime inspired them, but Darren Aronofsky, who made Requiem for a Dream and The Fountain and the movie The Whale that just came out and a bunch of other movies, I think he actually kind of bought the rights to it just so he could reference visual aspects of it and kind of remake it with his movie Black Swan.
Wow.
The shot of the protagonist Mima in the bathtub, just kind of like hunched over herself, screaming under the water. Mm-hmm. He lifted that directly and put it in Requiem for a Dream. He loves the movie so much.
Wow. So I guess a brief bit of synopsis for Perfect Blue before we dive too heavy into the themes. It's about a young pop idol named Mima. Mimarine, as her stage name was, who was part of an idol group. But she's giving up... Cham! She's giving up the idol life to switch to a career in acting. And she wants to be taken seriously as a serious actor. She stars on this drama called Double Bind. And as she transitions from the sort of manufactured innocence of pop idol stardom to the more dramatized seriousness and darkness of acting, she starts having a mental breakdown over the fact that she's getting stalked. There's this website online called Mima's Room that's pretending to basically be a diary of her life that has some frighteningly accurate details, and she starts to lose her grip on whether or not, maybe I actually am writing this, but I'm forgetting about it, and what's going on? I'm getting stalked, I'm scared, and basically reality just starts warping around her as she starts losing her mind over all of this pressure and trauma.
And people close to her start dying in brutal ways.
People on the show.
She's not sure if she's the culprit. Mm-hmm. People around her aren't sure if she's the culprit, and... yeah, man, I'm kind of kicking myself for not having seen this for so long because it's one of those movies for me personally that lived up to the hype.
That's good.
They dropped it on Shudder.
Yeah.
Like a month ago, and I'm like, oh, finally, Perfect Blue. Play, and this is less than 90 minutes, and it's so packed with just detail and concise storytelling and the editing, especially in the last third of the movie, when you just don't know.
Oh, there's some
what's real, what's on the set of her show, what's just in her head. It's a real mind.
There is some really cool cinematography in this. Is it still called cinematography when it's animation?
Yeah, I mean, there's technically still a camera, know.
There's an angle.
There's use of light and color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you watch the sub or the dub? I watched the sub for both of these.
I watched the sub for both.
Okay. I know there's an English dub, at least, of Paprika. I'm assuming there is one for Perfect Blue as well. It's been out for so long. It's such like a staple of anime at this point. But I haven't watched the dub for either, so I don't know what the dub quality is. This is purely based on the sub.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to know where to start with both of these films, honestly, because
can I start with something?
They're not just about one thing. They cover so much, and it covers so much so well. It's about just the crushing sort of inhumanity of stardom in the public eye.
Oh yeah,
the dehumanization of it, how it warps people's perceptions of their favorite actors or singers. And how it creates this image of them that's not real. It's about just the fragility of somebody's mind who's not ready to handle that kind of lifestyle, that kind of fame, that kind of attention. It's about what it's like to lose that once you have it, which kind of plays into the twists. It's about so much.
Yeah. Both of these films, both Paprika and Perfect Blue, use the theme of reality blending with fantasy in wildly different ways. With Perfect Blue, I think you hit the nail on the head. It is very much about how stardom, show business, all of this sort of blurs the line between reality and fiction in a way that makes performers, specifically female performers, women in media, lose their sense of self. Because Mima is going through this transition. She's kind of being pushed by her producer into an acting career because he's saying, your idol career is not going anywhere. You're not making any money with this. You've got opportunities on this show. You'll make a lot more money. And she's also got another agent, Rumi, who's no, she's a former idol. And she's no, she needs to stay in the idol game. She needs to, this will ruin her image. If she does this, she can never go back to being an idol. So she's being pulled in two different directions by her producers, and at the same time she's also not entirely sure what she wants herself, because
she's not sure who she is.
That's the whole point of this.
Dramatically, she doesn't know who she is, and
And it escalates to the point where she keeps hallucinating this other version of herself. It's her stage persona, Memarine, who is like in this like poofy idol dress and everything, all smiley and cute. And that Memarine calls herself the real Mima. And she's hallucinating this real Mima who's constantly telling her, like, you need to go back to being an idol. You need to go back to being sweet and innocent. And, you know, we had it all. We had all the fame, all the love. Why'd you stop? You're ruining our life. And Mima's, like, having this breakdown over it because she's still feeling pressured to continue with her acting career. And she wants to act. I think at the end of the film, she's still an actress, but she's having this, her mind's being torn apart by the regret of leaving behind her idol life and the pressure and trauma of going from this sweet, innocent, manufactured innocence of idol life to a very dark, very serious sort of acting career that's very much more adult. This is also a very interesting take on the transition from childhood to adulthood in a way that's manufactured for consumption and entertainment.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it kind of just made a light bulb go off because the opening scene is a performance of Shem. Mm-hmm. And, you know, on the surface, it's cute, it's bubbly, but like, you just know that, you know, it's even with the film just starting, you know, there's something kind of off. Mm-hmm. It's cute and innocent on the surface, but, you know, they're a little sexualized. They're a little kind of, you know, they're kind of playing into that sort of innocent, sexy image. Sexuality without, like, overtly advertising the sexuality or saying it's about sex.
There's definitely a lot I wish I knew more about Japanese pop idol culture. So that I could really dig into, like, the way that it's, like, criticizing that, because there's definitely a lot of that going on there.
Yeah, like her role in Shem, that's what she's personifying, like, innocent, sort of, like, naive sexuality. And then, like, this role that she wants to take on with her show Double Bind, forced sort of adult sexuality. And, of course, that has the darkest turn with the simulated rape scene.
Holy shit.
Which, what a harrowing moment, because it's not real. It's being acted. It's cameras. She's on set. She's not physically being hurt, but the trauma itself is enough.
And
she doesn't know how to process it, and she wasn't being taken care of to put it in the right frame of mind.
It's so powerful because, first off, this entire film is about the blurring between reality and fiction, and at this point, there's already some of that happening to her throughout that entire scene. First off, this scene is, you see everything except for the dick, basically, I think.
Yeah.
You see a man get on top of her, rip her shirt off. You see a whole crowd of men just holding her down. It is very graphic in its sexual violence. But it's all staged, like Tyler said. And there are moments where, like, the cameraman will say, cut, we need to get a different shot, we need to move the cameras, and everything will just come to a screeching halt. I think the man who is raping her, or, you know, stage raping her, would, like, lean over it sometimes and be like, sorry about this. And she's like, no, it's fine, you know, it's part of the scene. But then they'd go back into it, and she's screaming, and she's like, at one point, she literally passes out. And you're not even sure as the viewer if that, like, was her passing out, or if that was part of the performance.
Part of the script, yeah.
And it's, like, so bad that her agent Rumi, like, walks out of the room crying. She can't do this anymore. She can't watch this girl who was like an idol before throw away her innocence like this. And at the end of it, Mima gets a ride home. She's acting like everything's fine. It's no big deal, you know. This was all, you know, part of the performance that we did. I'm acting. I'm an actress now. I'm okay with this. She gets home, and she's had this fish tank in her room, and she finds out that the fish died. And she just breaks down over those fish dying. And you can tell that it's not about the fish. It's about the fact that, like, she was holding in all of this intensity and trauma of that scene until she was alone, and this one little inconvenience happened, and she breaks.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's emotional and harrowing and dramatic, and I watch a lot of genre cinema, and in a lot of older genre movies, they do kind of tend to use sexual assault as a crutch, which that's another discussion to have. But with this, there's so much empathy inherent in the narrative for Mima. Like, you see her nude numerous times, but like it never feels exploitative. It never feels like the animation, the camera is like leering at her. It's all to service the point of what is happening to her. The commodification of her body, the commodification of her persona.
I would argue that the camera does get leering, but it's intentionally framed in a way that's supposed to evoke anger, disgust, sorrow over the situation instead of lust. Because, like...
Well, I mean, yeah. Just one of the first shots of the movie is the creepy stalker. Mm-hmm. Like, he has his palm up while she's on stage, and he's, like, having it, like, in the perspective like he's holding her in his hand. That's how he sees her. That's who she is to him. It's not Mima. It's just the idol, you know? Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's a lot to say about... And I wish we had a female perspective on this episode because, like, hot damn, this is so much tied to specifically the commodification of women in media. Yeah, it's... God, I'm sorry, that rape scene really it hit hard when I saw it.
Yeah, and...
It's so uncomfortable. And then after that, she keeps having these moments with the real Mima, and after that scene, like, the real Mima, the one that's showing up in her hallucinations, is like, well, you can't go back now, you've thrown it all away, there's no way anybody will ever accept you, you've soiled yourself, and...
Yeah, that's another contradiction in it. It's like, oh, if you want to be taken seriously, you know, you'll do this adult role, but because so much of entertainment is fucking hypocritical, trying to mature, quote-unquote, into roles like that, people be like, oh, she's just the pop idol that wanted to, like, be serious, but then she just takes her clothes off and does lurid scenes.
And then she doubles down with, like, a pornographic photo shoot, almost as a way to, like, say, well, I'm in this now, I have to keep going, I have to keep pushing to be seen as adult, because I can't go back to being seen as a child like Innocence anymore. That's gone. That's over. It's done. I have to go all in on this, even though, like, it made me so grossed out and hurt to be in that, like, frame of mind for that scene, which is just, oh, it's so painful.
And everything you see her go through, when you figure out, when the twist happens and you figure out who has been murdering these people, who's ultimately behind it, that just, like, reframes that character in a completely different light, too.
Everyone in showbiz is psychotic.
Her manager... Okay,
Rumi.
Well, her doppelganger, let me backtrack, that she's been seeing. Love how creepy it is, because she's presented cute and bubbly like her stage persona, but like, and she bounces around kind of like Tigger, you know, on her feet.
She skips, and there's like one scene where she's like skipping along the post lots, like outside like the lamp posts.
It's so unsettling.
It's so messed up.
So unsettling.
Before we get into the big twist at the end, because I feel like that's sort of where you're ramping into.
Yes, that's what I'm ramping into.
There was something I wanted to touch on. Oh, what's so sad about all of this is that her, like, degrading herself and losing her sense of self in this pursuit of being taken seriously works. She starts out as a very small part in the show Double Bind. She's literally got, like, one line in the episode she's on, and as she becomes more and more, like, lurid, as she basically sells her body for the performance and sells her mindset for the performance, she gets like a more and more important role. The show becomes more and more popular. It works. Her psychosis, her breakdown, losing her sense of innocence, of losing her sense of reality, is good for the show. And that's so painful that she has to sell her soul for the show to go on.
God, what was I saying? Oh.
You're building into the big twist at the end, the reveal.
Of course, like, the whole conceit is like, oh man, like, she's losing her mind. Of course, this mirror image isn't real, but it is and it isn't at the same time.
Yeah.
Some of it has been hallucination this whole time, but some of it has not. Because her manager, Rumi, has been dressing up like her and committing murder and pulling the strings of the stalker as well, and contributing to the chat room.
She was running the chat room. Yeah, she was running that diary.
All to, like, get back to her days of being an idol because she is the end result of what Mima was going down.
Yeah.
She lost her sense of place, her sense of identity. The fame is gone. She thinks her looks are gone. And she's already broken. She's already insane.
She is,
because she just got wrung out by the same system that Mima is going through.
She is a great reveal villain because she wanted so much for Mima to cling to that manufactured innocence of idol life, of being like a pop idol, and it just goes to show that even if Mima had gone down that road, she would have still been like chewed up and spit out by the industry. Rumi is the end result of clinging to that idol life. She tried to maintain that idol status, but she got older. She became an adult woman, and at some point, people lost interest in her, and she was moved into a different position as like a producer, a manager, an agent. And it drove her mad that she lost that innocence simply because she wasn't young enough to be that idol anymore. So even if Mima had stayed down the road of being a pop idol, like, she wouldn't have been safe.
And it's just as the structure and the internal logic of the story, even though it's presented as this like trippy mindfuck, like, it all makes perfect sense from a character perspective. When you think about it, yeah, of course, like, somebody close to Mima is the one doing all this. But even though the stalker is fucking psychotic and disgusting, and he's not a mastermind.
No.
He can't pull all these strings, but you don't think it's anybody else but him because he's just so far off the deep end.
Can we talk real quick about how both the stalker, who I think they call Me-Mania, I don't think we ever get his real name.
Me-Mania.
And Rumi, how both of them have like extremely wide eyes in their character design. I'm not entirely
I did notice that.
Like almost fish-like eyes. Like their eyes are pulled all the way to the sides of their head. I don't know what the thought behind that was, but it makes them both look pretty grotesque.
Yeah, they're well, obviously the stalker's off-putting. He's
very much
from head to toe to be.
Yeah, he's got big fish bulbous eyes on top of that. They're big, gross. He's got like a crooked smile. He's pretty messed up looking.
Rumi, I think her wide set features make her look more unassuming than creepy looking, which obviously that aids in the narrative. But like they kind of make perfect sense as like a team, to use for the lack of a better word, because
she's manipulating him into attacking Mima, because she actually contacts him at one point and is like, that Mima's a fake, she's an imposter, she's ruining my image, you have to save me, Me-Mania. And he's like, I'll save you. And there's the whole scene, which I'm sure we'll double back to, with him attacking Mima on the set of Double Bind.
Yeah, they make a perfect team because they're both obsessed with the image. They're both obsessed with the fakery of it, the projection of it.
They're both obsessed with the idol of Mima and just the idol life in general. Both of them are obsessed with this image of innocence. With Rumi, I feel like it's more tragic because the innocence that she wants, even though she's the mastermind, it's more tragic because she wants to reclaim that innocence from her youth, that manufactured innocence that was actually never that innocent to begin with, because it was this sort of naive sexuality, like you said earlier, with the whole pop idol industry. With Me-Mania, it's much more hypocritical in that he wants Mima to go back to being an idol, or he thinks actually that the Mima is there as an imposter, and he's trying to kill her to save Mima's image. But in doing so, he tries to sexually assault her because he's also sexually obsessed. He doesn't even see his own hypocrisy of like, she's innocent, I need to save her, so I'm going to brutalize and attempt to murder and also sexually assault this woman.
Yeah, nobody ever said that psycho killers were.
It's completely lost.
Consistent.
It's completely lost on him that the innocence he's trying to save is totally fake, and even he doesn't believe in it because he's trying to rape and murder a woman over a presented image.
Oh, and speaking of the attacks, like I mentioned in the beginning, The original story was more of like a straightforward slasher of just an obsessive fan. I think there were, if I remember, there were only 2 kill scenes in the movie.
The writer and the porn
photographer guy.
And then her other agent gets killed later, after the scene. But that's like off screen. I
think Rumi is her agent while the guy is her manager, or I might have that reversed.
They both were working together to basically promote her career. I think he might have been her producer or something, and Rumi was the actual agent. But they were working together to help Mima's career, and they both kind of fucked her up in different ways.
But the violence, which isn't necessarily graphic, but it's still brutal.
Yeah.
It's so just like the animation just like masterfully like conveys everything it needs to so concisely. Like especially the kill in the elevator. That is just like whew. Mm-hmm. Goddamn. Just harsh. It's not often. Because, I'm so desensitized. It's not often kill scenes like make me go, whew. Yeah. But the ones in this movie, I was like, damn, these are upsetting.
I think
these are rough.
I think honestly, what might have happened too is that the rape scene itself was so intense that it kind of
you're a bit of a raw nerve after.
Yeah, it shocks you out of any numbness that you have towards that kind of violence. Suddenly, like, oh. We're back in this now. I can feel this again. That hurts.
Yeah, I was on the edge of my freaking seat during the last act of this movie because freaking Mimania gets a hold of her again, and you think it's gonna go, where the
where the rape scene was going. He's literally trying to reenact it. He at one point
he almost succeeds. Yeah, thankfully he doesn't.
At one point he says we have to stick to script, and he's like on the stage on top of her, ripping her clothes, and it's like, oh my god, like we're gonna actually see it now. That's horrifying.
He dies, thankfully. But what struck me is how ultimately tragic Rumi is as a character.
Yes.
Because even though she does terrible, monstrous things,
absolutely,
at the end it's still so fucking sad.
Because she was broken by this industry too.
She chases Mima into the street, and like, doesn't she like think the headlights are like stage lights?
Yes.
Oh, it's so just like...
She's chasing her, and the whole time, Mima is still hallucinating as well. It's not just like Mima has... Mima is only seeing Rumi in her reflection. When there's not a reflection, she's seeing the fake Mima, the idol Mima, chasing her, trying to kill her. But whenever you look in the reflection, you see Rumi. There's a fantastic shot where they're running down an alley, and there's like this wall of just... glass, I guess it's windows, and you're seeing Mima running, and you see her reflection behind her, and then you see the fake Mima chasing behind her, and it's just skipping happily, giggling, and then you see Rumi's reflection in it, and she's like huffing, her eyes are wide, she's holding like the knife, and she's just chasing full sprint after her. It's like showing the complete break between the happy little go-lucky Mimarine that she's trying to imitate and her complete like desperation and madness in the reflection.
So much great visual storytelling.
Yeah.
Because I was so like emotionally involved in the movie. The very end scene, I'm like, oh, it ends basically kind of happy. But like the more I think about it, I'm like, does it though? Does it? Because I was just so relieved that Mima seemed to be in a good place that I was like, oh, happy ending. But like the more I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh, is it a happy ending?
It's a very short ending, because what we get is that Rumi's put into a mental hospital. She still has moments where she thinks she's the fake Mima. She's probably never going to fully recover. We see Mima come to visit her, and then Mima goes off and leaves. And right before she leaves, she looks in the mirror. She's looking at herself instead of the fake Mima. And she says, like, this is the real Mima. And, like, she smiles at herself. So you get this sense that she's finally found her sense of self and identity after all of this madness has taken over her. So there is this sense of, like, at least Mima's kind of gotten her stuff together. And she's accepted herself. But, like, she's still an actress.
Look what had to happen.
Yeah.
You know,
it didn't didn't fix the issues that brought this up in the first place with the whole industry, like turning women into commodities to be consumed and twisting their ideology that they have to be one way or the other.
Yeah, and even though she goes to visit Rumi, like the way she's acting, she's not really like looking at Rumi or interacting with Rumi with like sadness or like. She's being perfectly like nice, quote unquote nice, but there's no like attempt on her end to be like, you know, human with her. It's just
she doesn't even
like,
get close.
It's kind of perfunctory.
Yeah, she gives her like flowers and then leaves.
So it's performative, and it's like, well, why are you going there then? You know, like what's your presence there? Like, what's that saying? What are you trying to say to Rumi? If like, are you there to reassure yourself more than to like reconcile, you know, what happened? I don't think she came out unscathed.
Oh, definitely not unscathed.
There's no way you can come out unscathed.
No. There's a point in the actual climax when Rumi is like on top of her trying to kill her where Rumi basically says something like, I don't remember exactly what she says, but she's basically like, you're not an idol, you're not an actress, you're nothing or whatever. Like, what are you? And Mima's just finally says like, it doesn't matter what I am Mima. And she just has this moment where she accepts that like, regardless of where she's going in her career, she's still a person in and of herself. But there's definitely still this sense that didn't fully develop. It's so quick, and like you said, with the ending being so brief and her sort of keeping her distance from Rumi, you still get the sense that, like, yeah, she's dealing with some stuff. Even if she's not having these hallucinations anymore, she's still definitely not in a space where she's totally fine. And the issues that started all this were beyond just Rumi and me mania. It was the pressures of the industry being put upon her.
I can't disagree with any of that. God, there's so much still to talk about, but I don't want to make this a 4-hour pod.
Let's move over to Paprika, and if we see any connections, we can sort of shuffle back and forth. Do you want to go ahead and rate Perfect Blue, or you want to save that for the end?
I'll save it for the end.
Okay. Start with a general synopsis with this one. Also very much about the blending between reality and fantasy. This one is more of a sci-fi thriller. It's about this machine called the DC Mini that lets you enter people's dreams. It's being used as a sort of experimental psychotherapy. You go into their dreams, sort of analyze what's going on, help them to confront their fears or their insecurities or their anxieties through their dreams. But some of it gets stolen. Some of the DC Minis get stolen, and someone starts terrorizing the public with it. Because apparently you can actually force dreams into other people's minds. And when you do that, it basically breaks down their own psyche as they just sort of lose their minds and lose their ability to tell dream from reality. So the whole time we're following Chiba, Dr. Chiba, who is also, she's like the head psychologist on this team, on this project, and she used the persona of Paprika, who looks different from her and even acts and performs different from her, to go into people's dreams and help them with all of their different problems and stuff. She's hunting down whoever stole this technology, along with the help of the inventor of the DC Mini, Tokita, I think, and a police detective named Konakawa, who was one of her patients and who has also sort of fallen in love with her. So that's the general synopsis. Where do you want to start with Paprika?
With the mini panic attack I had during the credits. There's kind of a cold open with a dream with Konakawa and Paprika, and she's trying to help him suss through all of this. She leaves the apartment or wherever they are, and the credits kick in with the soundtrack to this movie. I'm going to gush about it soon. And she's cute and she's bubbly, but she does the hop. She does the Mima hop.
Oh God, yeah.
For a couple seconds there, I'm like, oh God, no.
Evil! Evil!
But although there is some disturbing imagery and some heavy subject matter in this movie, it's not nearly as dark as Perfect Blue.
No, that's why I said thriller instead of horror.
Movie. It's kind of I don't want to say the opposite, but it's not nearly as, it's not going to punch you in the face.
Yeah.
Like Perfect Blue is.
It will weird you out some, though. There's some odd stuff that happens in this one.
The whole time you're just going to be like, what?
Yeah.
What?
It does a lot more with blurring reality and fantasy to the point where, like, even the audience isn't entirely sure, like, where the line was supposed to be.
Yeah, and I kind of wish that I watched this earlier because I only watched it the night before last.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much crammed into this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much going on that I don't know what thread to pull on.
Let's start with some character analysis. Because Dr. Chiba, our protagonist, she is the head psychologist on this. Paprika, as we've mentioned, is a very sort of bubbly, sort of flirtatious personality who helps people work through their issues by sort of being a little more headstrong and a little more forward. Dr. Chiba is very reserved and sort of quiet and kind of takes a step back and doesn't really interact with people and in the same way that Paprika does, to the extent that they're basically two separate personalities.
Yeah.
And we don't even really get a resolution necessarily as to why that is. We don't ever really see...
Yeah, we don't technically even know what Paprika is.
Yeah.
She's just there, and she's a part of Chiba.
Mm-hmm.
And fun parallel with Perfect Blue, one person or two sides of the same coin, but within the case of Chiba, she's aware of Paprika. And
and they seem to have like a symbiotic relationship. Like, Paprika is there to assist Chiba in her job of helping people, whereas, the real Mima versus the Mima that we saw was, a totally broken Saki. Here, there's hints that there's some issues between the two of them, and they sort of struggle for dominance between them towards the end of the movie, but it's never really fully explained why that is, and it's certainly not to the extent or tragedy of Mima. It's really more of sort of this weird, maybe she just uses Paprika as a way to express parts of herself that she's not comfortable with in her day-to-day in reality. As Paprika, she can do her job in a way that's different and unique and lets her get out some of her own internalized issues that she's not ready to face.
I mean, this might sound stupid, but it's in the name. Paprika. Paprika's a spice.
Yeah.
She spices things up. She could be a bit more, upfront and forward.
Mm-hmm. And fun.
It's like Mima, but not nearly as dark and tragic. It all pretty much boils down to Chiba having to reconcile with, we're the same, but we're also different.
Yeah. This movie also does a lot more pushing into the fantasy. With Perfect Blue, it was more about the breakdown of her psychology, not being able to tell what the fiction of her performance was versus the reality of her as a person. With this, it's the blurring between reality itself, not just Chiba's reality, but reality itself and the world of dreams. Like, when we're in the dream world, Konakawa, as we see throughout his story, he used to be like an amateur filmmaker before he gave up that dream, and all of his dreams take place in different film genres. There's one scene where he's in a circus, there's one where he's like in a spy thriller, there's one where he's like swinging through the vines as Tarzan. In each of these, the people in the dreams sort of change and mold, like their clothes will change, or even their forms will change. Tokita at one point goes in, he becomes like a robot. So there's a lot more like...
I love Robot Takeda.
Yeah, there's a lot more pushing into like the absolute absurdity of dreams. Even in the dialogue, there's points where like people are just talking nonsense, and at some point...
utter gibberish.
There was one point where I was looking at the subtitles and I'm like, do I need to watch the dub for this? Is this like a mistranslation or something? But like...
Was it when the little guy, Shima...
Yeah, like the chief of staff, he gets taken over and he's just spouting nonsense and everybody's staring at him, and I'm like... Is this supposed to be something serious? And then he runs down the hall and tries to jump out a window, and we're like, oh shit, he's just lost his mind.
Oh shit, this fucking movie. Let's talk kind of bigger picture.
Okay.
There's a lot of movies that deal in dreams, and the psyche and the subconscious.
This is pre-Inception, by the way. This is 2006.
Yes, and there's a lot when Inception came out. There was a lot of talk like, oh, Christopher Nolan ripped off Paprika, and they're mostly completely different, but there's just enough. There's just enough, and Christopher Nolan has never outright said that. Yeah, I saw this anime film, Paprika, inspired Inception. Mm-hmm. Particularly in Konakawa's reoccurring hallway dream.
Yeah, I was thinking of that
where
one.
It warps and gets all... Yeah. Like, that's... Christopher Nolan pretty much just translates that in Inception. I like what the movie is saying about dreams. Its relationship to what dreams are. Mm-hmm. With the characters in the world. They're just... Because the villain... we get another kind of fake out because we think it's one of the scientists on the team,
Himuro. I think it's the assistant of Dr. Tokita.
Yeah, we think it's him, but it actually turns out to be, which it's kind of obvious if you think about it. The chairman named Inui.
I think Inui.
Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Who has this almost how would you describe his? It's almost dogmatic. This dogmatic view of what dreams are supposed to be and represent and be for humanity. He thinks technology is just the corruption of dreams, and once you introduce that, it's just it's gonna just kill everything, kill dreams, kill progress. When he doesn't understand that he's the one standing in the way of progress.
Yeah, There's two main motivations for him, at least as far as I can tell. One of them's kind of problematic. It's one that we've seen a few times. He's in a wheelchair, and he wants to use the dream world as a way to escape the confines of his body. And there's a lot of films and media that do this, where it's like we turn the handicapped person into a villain because they're tired of their handicap and they're willing to go to horrifying extremes in order to not be handicapped anymore. And that's kind of problematic in its themes. But the more interesting theme here is that he sees the world of dreams as something sacred to be protected from human influence, but in order to protect it, he wants to control people's dreams. He wants to basically become the god of dreams in order to prevent other people from manipulating dreams. So there's that inherent hypocrisy in his position that's still very fascinating, as seeing dreams as something sacred beyond the realm of human control, as something spiritual, instead of just, the way it's being treated by the team of the doctors, who are basically seeing it as an avenue for healing and medicine, and something that can be broken down and looked through and sifted through and analyzed in order to help people, and be used basically as a tool. He sees it as something sacred that shouldn't be touched or manipulated or anything, and he's trying to stop them by basically replacing them as the controller, the guardian of dreams.
Mm-hmm. I like that it subverts the trope that the movie initially starts with of the technology is we've gone too far with our technology. And it's not this team of scientists and psychologists and the device itself. It's the person who hates the idea of it in the first place that corrupts it, that uses it for ill. After everything's said and done, the name of the device just dropped out.
DC Mini.
The DC Mini is seen as it's a good thing. This can be a good tool to help people. There's nothing wrong with understanding our dreams and what they mean. And I also like that the subplot of Konakawa and his dream of, shooting that person in the back didn't turn out to be something dark and traumatic. It's a lot more... Innocence, not the word.
It's more tied to his personal journey instead of a moment of trauma. He, as a young man, wanted to be a filmmaker, and he had someone that he had a partner. He had a childhood friend that he made films with, very amateur films. But as he was getting older, as he was starting to move into college, he realized that the world's not like this. It's very unlikely I'll ever make it as a filmmaker. I need to move into a more secure profession like police work. And he left his childhood friend behind, stopped making films, and quit in the middle of one of their projects so that he could pursue a job as a policeman. Then his childhood friend died of, I don't remember what the sickness was, but he died, and he feels like he betrayed his childhood friend and himself in giving up their shared dream of making films.
Yeah, it's more of a human backstory and a more of a human reveal, because like you think it's going to be this big traumatic, like what's this skeleton in the closet, and it's just more soulful than that, and that's what really won me over to the movie, because for like the first half it's pretty much plot driven and concept driven and imagery driven, but you don't realize that it's laying a lot of character groundwork. Mm-hmm. By the second half, it becomes a lot more heartfelt and emotional than you would expect it to be. It moved me emotionally at the end in a way I didn't expect it to, because I'm thinking, when I'm watching, I'm like, yeah, I'm really liking this, but as far as emotional journeys go, like Perfect Blue and Tokyo Godfather's like, whew. But and this one isn't as heavy emotionally as the other two, but it's definitely got that human element that Kon uses in his work.
And Konakawa was such a fun character too, because everything he has had is based on like old classic movie tropes. So all of his dreams are like that. And there's his final big moment is great because he's trying to save not even Paprika. Paprika at this point has been like sort of pseudo killed. The dream world's getting weird. He has
just this never ending parade of just nonsense that's just taking over Japan.
He has this unconscious Chiba in his arms. He's chasing down the chairman's lackey, Osuna, who is one of the other doctors on the team, who was obsessed with Chiba, obsessed with, not in love with her in a legitimate way, but just like obsessed with being with her. And he's chasing that guy down because he had like hurt Chiba and Paprika, and he's in that hallway, which we've seen so many times before, and he's failed to catch the culprit, and he finally takes the shot, and Osuna goes down, and there's this great big sweeping outward shot of him holding the unconscious Chiba in his arms, smoking gun in hand, the sun blazing behind him. It's so like old school action hero, and it's perfectly tied to his character. And in fact, there's like a shot of like a whole audience in a theater clapping and applauding him, including his childhood friend who died. It's so corny and hokey, but it's tied to his character so well that you're like, hell yeah, Konakawa, you do that.
And that's another thing that I'm still trying to unpack, is that I did not expect this movie to be about movies. Mm-hmm. That's a whole nother thing this movie is about. It's about movies, and like in a way I completely didn't expect, because there's this whole scene where Konakawa is talking to Paprika like about camera technique and shot setup and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh my god, this movie, it's my head in.
I was sitting there and I'm like, oh my god, this is just Tyler. I love it. Like, you need to do a cosplay of Konakawa. I'll be your Paprika.
Yes, be my Paprika. She cutie. You can pull it off.
I can pull it off. I got the tits for it.
I got like a little misty-eyed at the end in a happy way, because there's just so much subtle cuteness. Mm-hmm. Like, there's Takeda, which I thought I was crazy. Mm-hmm. Because I'm like, is there like this thing between Takeda and
yeah! It's very subtle.
He's a big boy.
He's a big boy.
Big boy.
Literally, everybody refers to him as a man-child because he's a genius. He invented the DC Mini, but he's very childish in his perception of it, very idealistic and thinking like, here's this wonderful machine I made that lets us go into dreams. Isn't that cool to just like look into people's dreams and be able to move around and like see all the crazy things they imagine? Isn't that awesome? Without really considering like the morals or the implications or the consequences of it. But everyone around him has different perceptions on him. Some people, like the chairman, thinks that we have to keep him in check. He's dangerous because he's a child with the mind of a genius who's creating dangerous things. Chiba even scolds him at one point for not considering, the implications of his actions. But there's beneath that veneer of sort of absent-minded childish is this just genuine love for the human experience and the human mind in Tokita that just makes him so endearing, despite the fact that like he's kind of a big fat stereotype. In a lot of ways they play his fatness for laughs and also subvert it. It's kind of a weird balancing act the movie does.
It's weird, and it takes the finale to bring it home.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not one to see a problematic element in the movie and be like, oh, well, this sucks now. But for most of the movie, although Takeda is layered, he's a layered character.
Yeah.
There's a bit too many, you're just sloppy, you're fat. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of disappointing for Satoshi Kon, you know? Like,
especially considering Tokyo Godfathers and how, like, well he did with, like, a trans character. Like, I fucking love Hana to death.
At the end, when the trait that was played for laughs earlier, his appetite, when that's used to save the day, with, like, because him and Chiba, like, have this weird baby dream thing. Like, they merged into, like, this weird baby dream thing. What the fuck happened there? They beat the chairman by just eating him, basically.
Yeah.
It's not a gross visual or anything. They're just, like, sucking him in like smoke. And, like, each, like, inhale, she gets bigger and more actualized, and he disappears. And I'm like, there it is. Like, that's what this was building to.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very, very end, voiceover in, like, a letter to the cop, she was like, yeah, me and Takeda were getting married. And I'm like, oh!
It's very cute. And there's a flashback to a scene early on in the movie. There's a scene early on in the movie where Takeda was introduced, actually, where he's stuck in an elevator because he's literally so big that he can't fit through the elevator doors.
That callback.
And, like, at first you're thinking, oh, God, it's just a big fat joke. And then we get the callback, and we see Chiba helping him out of the elevator. They both fall, and then there's this very tender moment where she's just kind of like leaning up against his back, sort of just like nestling into him. She's kind of scolding him a bit, but she's also saying very nice things and loving things too while she's just caressing him. And, like, she has a moment where it's like, you're such a big slob, but that appetite of yours and that thirst for life. I don't remember what she said in particularly, but she said that, like, even though it's childish, even though it's a bit gross and grotesque, there's such a innocence and love for life to it that she adores. It's such a sweet moment that makes, like, I don't know if it necessarily undoes all of the fat jokes and, like, fat shaming around him, but it's enough where it's like you can see that the film was doing that for a reason. It's not just like he was meant to be, haha, he's the fat, dumb man-child character. There is a depth and nuance to it beyond that, even if the movie still kind of maybe goes a little too hard into it at times.
I'm so dumb. I'm just trying to, like, decode the movie.
There's a lot of stuff I still don't get.
Understand. I just did not catch Chiba's, like, more inner affection for Takeda the whole time until she takes the big robot version of him out, and then we get that flashback. I'm like, oh, you know, she's just protagonist. She wants to help the guy because she's the good guy. I didn't understand that it was motivated by something more than, you know, just her needing to save the guy and
mutual respect, because he is a genius. He invented the machine she's using. But yeah, I like that it wasn't, like, foreground, like their romance wasn't the foreground throughout the whole film, that was sort of subtle until the climax, because this didn't need to be. There's a lot of people in this movie that are obsessed with and in love with Chiba or Paprika. Konakawa's sort of infatuated with Paprika. Osanai, who we talked about, is the lackey of the chairman. He's obsessed with Chiba herself. But Takeda has always been sort of... He's very familiar with her and very nice towards her. He treats her very friendly, but we never really see any open, like, obsession with her and the others the way that the others do. It's more like, you know, we work together. We're good friends. He refers to her as At-chan, which that's like a very informal way of referring to her, especially as another doctor. But yeah, there's a lot of hints that sort of show how close they are without actually making it in the foreground until the end, which is good.
We haven't really mentioned the animation in these two movies yet.
Oh, Lord, spectacular.
Both animated by Madhouse.
Yeah. Top of the...
Oh, my God.
Top of the top.
Oh, the detail, the backgrounds, the environments, the movement, the fluidity. Especially in Paprika.
Yeah. Paprika.
Trippy shit.
Paprika gets weird. There's scenes where they're flying through the city on clouds. There's a scene where she turns into a fairy and is flying through a forest, diving through these living vines. There's this weird-ass parade that's constantly going through the streets. It's got, like, toys and dolls and, like, a Statue of Liberty and a walking refrigerator and just, like, all kinds of weird shit.
I really want to, like... Because there's gotta be meaning to every image, like, choice in this movie, because especially the parade, like, like Kon and his team didn't just choose like
random shit.
Random shit. It's got to like it's got to tie into what he was going for with the themes of the movie. And one of my favorite shots of the movie is the most disturbing shot, of course, because that's me. Osanai has Paprika pinned like a butterfly in the dream, and he's being creepy on her, saying, "Oh, I'm obsessed with you." And he's touching her, and he gets to her crotch, and his hand literally goes into her crotch.
It melds into it. It's not like
kind of like merging, like liquid.
Yeah.
And like he runs his hand up her to peel off Paprika's layer to reveal Chiba.
It's so gross.
Just the way the skin moves in the face when his hand reaches her head.
Yeah.
And the animation is perfect. It's so good.
There's also a shot in this that I didn't realize was from this. I'd seen it in a bunch of parody stuff before. It's when all of the businessmen are standing on the ledge of a building smiling, and they all dive off one after another. Like, they're all smiling, going, whee! Just like diving off the side one after the other, but they're basically diving to their deaths. I don't know how many people actually died in this climax, because the climax is so blurry. The climax of this film is the machine, the DC Mini, is starting to affect everyone. Like, not just a handful of individuals. Everyone is losing their grip between reality and dream. And people start turning into weird stuff. They start joining that gigantic parade going on. They're jumping into the street. Like, the world is twisting. A giant hole forms in the world, and the chairman comes out as a giant god, like this big translucent god, and blows up half the city. And it's like, I don't know how much of this is dream anymore and how much of this is reality. Who's dying?
That's kind of the point.
I know. It's like so good.
I'm watching the movie, and Erica's next to me. She's reading, and she's just looking up occasionally. This is the wrong movie to occasionally look at.
It really is.
During the sort of dream battle Paprika's having with Inui, I'm like, oh, look at her looking like a cute little griffin there. And Erica's like, oh, she's got fuzzy boobs. And then she dives into the ocean, then she turns into a mermaid, and Erica's like, oh. And then Inui has to ruin it by being a giant face fish.
Whale
that comes and swallows her. This movie. So much to unpack.
There's so much I need to watch it a few more times to unpack it, because I'm sure I don't get everything it's saying. With Perfect Blue, I think Perfect Blue is a more perfect movie, I'd say, as an overall experience in terms of the themes and messages it's tackling. It's also a bit clearer, even though it's doing this blurring of reality and dream. It's a bit clearer what's going on. With Paprika, there's so much happening and so much going on with the ways that dreams are part of our psyche, but also twist our psyche and blur the lines of reality and fantasy, that, like, I don't know what all the messages of Paprika are.
Yeah, it's packed, and like not in like a sloppy way. Because it's so concise. Both of these movies are very concisely told, but like, I didn't know it was possible to pack so much stuff in a 90-minute movie and have it be coherent. Mm-hmm. Because when you take out like the trippiness of it, like, Paprika is actually kind of a simple story to understand, you know, on a basic level.
Yeah, machine gets stolen, scientists who create it try to find it before it's used for evil.
It's just you got to pay attention to it, because it's telling you a lot of important things in a very subtle manner.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, the score was composed by, he's very popular and very acclaimed, Susumu Hirasawa. as soon as like the theme song for Paprika kicked in the credits, it's called "The Girl in Byakuya."
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, it instantly like, you know how music affects you sometimes. You can't really articulate. I was like, oh, I was like in. I was like, this makes me feel something. I feel something hearing this.
Yeah.
And like, as soon as it ended, like I looked up the composer. I listened to the soundtrack. I listened to a bunch of other shit he's released in his career, and I've had The Girl in Byakuya just on repeat for the past day and a half. Like, I am into it.
That's awesome.
So good. So good.
The late, great Satoshi Kon.
Oh God, man, I'm sad. Like I didn't know he was dead. I didn't know he died.
Yeah,
like
you didn't know until this podcast that he was dead, or did you? I mentioned it
just until I know, but until a couple days ago when I was looking into the movies more. I'm like, how come he hasn't made more movies?
Yeah.
Oh, that's why.
It's a tragedy.
It's sad because a filmmaker hasn't made me this excited in a very long time. Like, I think he's one of my favorite filmmakers now, just with the 3 movies that I've seen.
I mean, that's awesome. There was a movie he was working on.
Yeah. Which is, I think, what the cop, Konakawa, was going to see at the end of Paprika, actually.
It was the one that he was going to put out?
Yeah, it was his next movie, yeah.
Yeah, that's sad.
And there's this fun, indulgent, cute joke at the end. He's going to the movies.
Yeah.
Posters for his first 3 movies on the marquee. Yeah, I am like, I need to watch Millennium Actress Stat, which is the only other movie of his I haven't seen. And then I need to get on Paranoia Agent, which is his anime series, Stat. And then just rewatch everything over and over again.
He did a few episodes, or I think as storyboard artist and key animator for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. But like, that's not director role.
Credits.
Yeah.
Which I think the audience at this point knows that I fucking love these movies. If it's not apparent. Oh, I did want to mention that at the time of this recording, not by the time it's released, but as the time of this recording, we're actually doing this on the 25th anniversary week of Perfect Blue. So
really?
Kind of a happy accident there.
Happy accident, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's a shame. He was such a visionary.
Yeah, it's
cancer's a bitch.
It's just yeah. Especially pancreatic cancer. That's one of the.
Yeah, it took my grandfather's awful.
Oh.
But yeah, to end this on a downer note.
Got anything else you want to talk about?
I don't know, man. They're both such good films. I think Perfect Blue, in terms of overall experience, I liked more. Which
I'm
is
surprised.
It's surprising because
it's such a dark film.
I like darker stories at times, but I think overall its messages are clearer. It's a little more coherent in its storytelling, whereas Paprika is intention. And my opinion may change with subsequent viewings, but Paprika is a bit more intentionally vague with its storytelling simply because it's supposed to be about like the wild absurdity of dreams to the point where you kind of get lost in what exactly the movie's trying to say. I mean, certain characters' arcs are very clear. Konakawa, I think in particular, his arc is very clear from the start, but like there's some ideas in here with Paprika where it's almost like I'm not entirely sure where the movie was going with it. And that might be something that I come to learn more about with subsequent viewings, and I changed my opinion entirely. Kind of absolutely. Yeah. Both of these are big rewatch movies. Make sure you're in a stable frame of mind for Perfect Blue, though, because it's a heavy one.
It's a heavy one. Oh, and Paprika's a funny movie too.
Yes, very cute, very funny, and they're a nice double feature. Like to go from Perfect Blue and then swing back up to Paprika, I think would be a great double feature.
The scene when the dreams are taking over the real world, and the giant baby doll, like they're walking down the hall, and then they just like stop, and then they look, and then the giant baby doll face is just staring at them in the window,
and they just pause, and they're like, "Oh shit!" and they start running as it destroys like the bridge they're standing on.
And I think once I think there's a part where the little guy, Dr. Shima, has to wake up Chiba from the dream machine. And she just like wakes up in like a Scream and just slaps the hell out of him. Reflex.
There's a lot of funny stuff with Shima. Like, whenever he gets taken over the first time, the way Paprika wakes him up is she inflates him like a balloon until he pops.
To wake him out of the dream.
Yeah. And then when he pops, he, like, wakes up. He's like, oh, I'm alive. Yeah, but she smacks the shit out of him whenever she wakes up. It's great. It's great, too, because that's part of Konakawa's scene. Is like at the end of his whole thing after he saves her, he leans down and takes a kiss while she's asleep and she wakes up in the middle of it. So she's waking up to slap Konakawa, but the shock of it wakes her up in reality and she smacks the doctor. So it's so funny.
Oh man, I haven't been this excited to record a pod in a while. Actually,
this is going to be one of our.
I was so enthusiastic about these.
This is going to be a good episode for one of our more serious ones because like. We didn't have many jokes in this pod, but like this is going to be a good one in terms of actual analysis because these are great movies, chock full of material to analyze.
I actually wanted to prepare more for this one, if that says anything, but I didn't have time. I'm like, no, I need to I want to be able to say everything ever that I could say about these two movies to be the smartest.
Both. It's never going to happen. I mean, we would have to watch these movies multiple times to get to the point where we would have like new stuff to say about them because both of them are so, like you said, so packed with material.
Oh, well, do you have any special segments?
We've kind of discarded review unless Erica's on because she's better at it than I am. I'll admit that. I can give you the scores though. Perfect Blue had 83% critic and 89% audience. Paprika,
too low.
I know. Paprika had 85% critic and 87% audience, which surprised me that Paprika was rated higher. I feel like Perfect Blue.
Well, you know what I say about Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, it's whatever. Yeah, I didn't really prepare any other segments just because, I mean, we could do Recs. I'm trying to think of films, not just, like generic anime Recs. I'm trying to think of films that specifically tie to this sort of theme of blending dream and reality like this.
Okay. I got some.
Yeah, go for it.
Most of the films of David Lynch, specifically Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive. I'm not going to get into too much of what they're about because I'll just ramble and then Isaac will have to pull me back. But Mulholland Drive deals with actresses and not knowing what's real and what's a dream. And Lost Highway deals with a musician who doesn't know what's real and what's fantasy. But they play out completely different from each other. And they're both very, very scary. Psychologically scary. Not like, boo, ha, scary. But like, this is unsettling, uncomfortable scary. So those, definitely check those out.
There's lots of stuff that I've read and watched that fit these themes, but I'm just blanking right now on what they are. Like a specific example. Because there's lots of stuff.
Just think of anything that has to do with identity, really. Yeah. Like identity of oneself, reconciling that. I mean,
you say that, I'm just going to say Persona.
Oh God.
Don't crack open that. I've talked about Persona at length, and I'll talk about it more when I get to the fan fiction episode with Erica. So I'm not going to ramble on about Persona. Oh, I mean, no, never mind. Not really. I was gonna say the Epithet Erased book that I mentioned in our awards, but that's not so much. I guess to an extent it is. There are characters there's a character who is using fantasy as an escape from reality. It's less about the loss of being able to tell the difference and more like the intentional replacement of reality with fantasy. So that Epithet Erased Prison of Plastic book that I mentioned in our awards episode, if that's interesting to you, which again, it was like my pick of the year, so that kind of touches on that.
I would also like to recommend Persona, but not the Persona that Isaac is recommending. I am recommending the Ingmar Bergman Swedish film Persona that also deals with performers and the blurring of reality therein and identity therein.
Shit, what else? Like, there's so much stuff that touches on that theme that, like, it's hard to just focus in on one for me. Like, so much of what I look at and read and watch and play is about sort of blurring that line. All of fantasy really is about sort of blurring the line between reality and fiction to an extent. A lot of the Ghibli movies do that.
Yeah. There's this great horror movie called Come True that's about dreams and the study of sleep and mapping dreams with some amazing visuals. Just there's multiple scenes in this movie where like it's just the camera is just moving through a dreamscape, and the way the dreamscape is visualized, it's very, very baroque, and it's some of the best dream imagery I've ever seen in a movie. The very, very end is a sticking point for people with the movie Come True. If nobody caught that before, the movie's called Come True. The very, very ending, I still don't know how I feel about it. A lot of people, like, the movie was fantastic until the very end, completely ruined everything.
Really?
Other people are fine with it. The very ending, either you take it at face value or that opens up a whole other set of possibilities about what the movie was really about. Come True, which is a fairly recent movie. I think came out in 2018, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. All right. Well, you had some good recs on this one. I'm kind of falling short here. Are we ready to rate the damn thing and be done with it?
Yes. Perfect Blue, perfect movie. 10 out of 10 shams.
I was going to give it 3 out of 3 cham idols, yeah. Okay, yeah, Perfect Blue is a perfect film. I think it hits every theme that it wants to on the head beautifully. It's beautifully animated, grotesque with some of its character designs, like I mentioned, but that's intentional. Yeah, no problems with Perfect Blue.
Paprika, I don't really have any substantive problems with it either. It's less perfect than Perfect Blue, but still pretty perfect in my opinion. I'll give it 15 paprikas as a mermaid out of big whale face bad guy.
Okay, I'll give it 10 out of 11 herbs and spices in the Kentucky Fried Chicken recipe.
You're so much more clever than me. I used to have a fun sense of humor. I used to be funny. I actually used to be funny, and not in like an ironic, he's trying so hard way. I don't know what happened.
I prepare my jokes in advance, so I have to...
you are the writer of the two of us. No, I'm a writer too, just not as successful.
If by successful, you mean I'm posting fanfic online and I have like a few hundred people who follow me, sure.
Personally successful.
You know what? Yes, very much so. I've written a lot. I have a lot of people giving me good feedback. I'm not going to downplay my success. I've done well for myself.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it's totally, both great films. Perfect Blue, perfect. Paprika. Perhaps in time I will come to value its seasoning a bit more once I get a little bit more...
Because it is a spicy.
It is spicy. But I think that's going to do it for us. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends, drop a like or a rating. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter @TongueandGeek. That's @TongueandGeek, all one word. Thank you for listening. And remember, as we learned back in Tokyo Godfathers, don't throw your baby in the trash.
And don't become a pop idol.
And don't try to become God of the dream world.
Rest in peace.
Don't do
a lot of things. Rest in peace.
Satoshi Kon.